The alarm tore through my cockpit before I even had time to blink the sleep out of my eyes. Red light flashed across every panel. My ship shook once, hard, then settled into a low, steady groan that I did not like at all. "Ethan, do you copy?" The voice in my ear belonged to Nora, my flight controller back at the station. She sounded tense, and Nora never sounded tense. "I copy," I said, pulling myself upright in my seat. "What am I flying into?" "A distress signal. Old one. 11 days old, but it just resurfaced on our scanners. Coordinates put it near the Kessa debris field." I frowned at the display in front of me. The Kessa field was not a friendly place. Broken ships drifted there for years, torn apart in a fight nobody liked to talk about, frozen in silence ever since. "Whose ship?" I asked. There was a pause, too long a pause. "It is Voskar," Nora finally said. "A military vessel. Command wants you to observe only. No boarding, no contact. Just confirm status and report back." My stomach tightened. Everyone in the fleet had heard about the Voskar. Tall, scaled, fierce beings with wings folded against long bodies, strong enough to tear through hull plating with their bare claws. We were not at war with them, not exactly, but we were not friends either. Just two cautious sides watching each other from a distance, neither one willing to make the first move. "Copy that," I said, approaching now. My ship dropped out of high-speed travel, and the wreck came into view through my window. It was worse than I expected. The hull was cracked wide open along one side, metal peeled back like the skin of an old fruit. No lights, no power signature, just cold, dead silence floating in the black. Except it was not silent. A sound came through on an open channel, thin and broken, rising and falling in a strange rhythm. My translator could not make sense of it. It was not words. It was something rawer than words, something that hit me straight in the chest before my brain even understood what I was hearing. "Nora, I am picking up a transmission," I said, voice tight. "It sounds like crying." "Confirm and log it," she said, then return to base. I stared at the wreck. The sound kept coming, layered, desperate, and impossible to ignore. "Ethan," Nora said again, sharper this time, "do not board that ship. That is a direct order from command." I closed my eyes for 1 second. Then I opened them and reached for the airlock control. "Copy," I said, returning to base. I was lying, and I knew it the moment the words left my mouth. The inside of the wreck was worse than the outside. My boots crunched over broken panels and frozen puddles of coolant. Every hallway looked the same, torn open, stripped of light, stripped of warmth. I moved fast, following the sound down through 3 decks, my breath fogging in front of my visor with every step. The sound grew louder the deeper I went, until I reached a round chamber that felt strangely warm compared to the rest of the ship. The floor was shaped like a wide, shallow bowl, lined with soft material, clearly built for something small to rest in. And there, tangled together for warmth, were 5 creatures unlike anything I had ever seen up close. They were young Voskar. Small, thin, their scales still soft instead of hard like armor. One had a burn along its side, another had a wing bent at a wrong angle. All of them looked hungry, tired, and afraid. The largest one, maybe the oldest of the group, pulled itself in front of the others the moment it saw me. It spread one wing out wide, even though the wing was clearly hurt, trying to shield the smaller ones with the only thing it had left to give. Its eye locked onto mine, glowing like a small ember in the dark, and it let out a sound sharp enough to make my ears ring inside my helmet. Every part of my training told me to step back. Command had given me a clear order. These were not my people. This was not my fight. I had no business being in this room at all. I stepped forward instead. "Hey," I said softly, lowering myself down slowly, keeping my hands open and visible. "Easy now. I am not here to hurt you." It did not understand my words, but it understood my tone, the same way a nervous animal understands calm, the same way a frightened child understands a gentle voice, even before they understand the meaning behind it. I did not reach for the wounded leader first. I reached for the smallest one instead, the one shivering hardest at the very back of the pile, because that one needed help the most, and was least likely to see me as a threat. It flinched away from my hand. Then, slowly, it leaned into it. Then it pressed its whole small, trembling body against my chest, as if it had been waiting its entire short life for someone, anyone, to finally hold it close. One by one, the others followed. Maybe it was scent. Maybe it was some instinct passed down through generations that told them if the guardian trusted me, they could trust me too. Within minutes, I was sitting in the middle of that nesting bowl with 5 hatchlings pressed against me, and the wounded leader finally let its head drop, exhausted, onto my knee. "Nora, come in," I said quietly, careful not to move too much, since none of them wanted me to move at all. "Ethan, where are you?" Her voice was sharp with worry. "You were supposed to return to base." "I need a medical team," I said. "Someone trained in Vossiscar biology, if we have anyone like that. And warm blankets, bring a lot of them." There was a long pause on the other end. "Ethan, repeat that. Did you say medical team, for survivors?" "Yes," I said. 5 of them. Hatchlings. They are not fighting me. Just trust me on this, and send the team, quickly." It took nearly 3 hours before a proper shuttle arrived. Every time I tried shifting even slightly during that wait, the smallest one whimpered, and the wounded leader tightened its claws gently but firmly around my wrist, refusing to let me go anywhere. So I stayed exactly where I was. I fed them slowly from my own ration supply, small mouthfuls at a time, careful and patient. I hummed an old, half-remembered tune my mother used to sing when I was small myself, and I spoke softly to them in words they could not understand, telling them they were not alone anymore, that somebody had finally come. When the shuttle finally landed and a young woman named Laura stepped through the open hatch, she stopped in the doorway and simply stared. 5 young Vossiscar were curled peacefully around a human she had never met, breathing slow and steady for what looked like the first time in days. "How," she asked quietly, "did you manage this?" I looked down at the smallest one, now sleeping soundly against my ribs, its little chest rising and falling in a calm, even rhythm. "I do not know," I admitted. "I think nobody ever tried before." The days that followed were some of the strangest of my life. The hatchlings were moved to a specially prepared section of our station, warm and quiet, built quickly under Laura's careful instructions. She studied everything about them with patient curiosity, learning what they could eat, how their wings needed to be wrapped to heal properly, and how much rest their small growing bodies required. I visited every single day. I told myself at first that it was only to make sure they stayed calm during their treatment, since Laura mentioned they responded better whenever I was nearby. But somewhere along the way, that reason stopped being the whole truth. I visited because I wanted to see them get stronger. I visited because the smallest one always pushed its way to the front the moment I walked in, demanding attention before anyone else got a turn. I started calling her Ember, because of the way her eyes caught the light. The wounded leader, whose wings slowly began healing under careful treatment, became Talon in my mind, though I never said the name out loud in front of Laura, afraid she would think I had grown too attached. She probably already knew anyway. 3 weeks passed before anything changed on a larger scale. Word had apparently traveled far beyond our little station, carried through channels I did not fully understand, reaching all the way to the highest levels of Vossiscar leadership. I expected consequences. I expected anger, formal complaints, accusations that a human had broken some sacred boundary by touching young Vossiscar without permission. Instead, one quiet morning, Nora called me into the command deck with an unusually careful tone in her voice. "There is a ship requesting docking clearance," she said. "A Vossiscar ship, first one in 4 years." My chest tightened. What do they want? Nora glanced at her screen, then back at me. They are asking, specifically, for the human who held the broken-winged one. I stood at the docking bay entrance a short while later, watching the massive shape of the Vossiscar vessel settle into place. When the hatch finally opened, a single figure stepped through, far larger than any Vossiscar I had seen before. Its scales a deep, weathered gray, its wings folded with slow, deliberate grace. It moved toward me until it towered above me completely, then lowered its enormous head until its glowing eye rested nearly level with mine. "You are the one," it said, the translation running just half a second behind the low rumble of its true voice, who opened his arms to the wounded young. "I am," I said, standing my ground despite every instinct urging me to step back. "Among my people," the elder continued, "there is no creature lower than one who abandons wounded young to die alone, and there is no creature higher than a stranger who chooses to carry them, though he owes them nothing at all." It straightened slowly, wings settling neatly against its back like a great folded cloak. "You have been named kin-bearer," it said, "the first outsider to receive that honor in 300 cycles. The hatchlings will remember you, so will we." I thought back to that cold, broken ship, to the standing order still logged somewhere in my file telling me not to open that airlock at all. I thought about how close I had come to simply following that order, turning my ship around, and leaving 5 frightened young lives behind in the dark. I was glad, more than I could put into words, that I had not listened. Life on the station changed after that visit, slowly but noticeably. The Voskar elder, whose name I eventually learned was Korath, returned several more times over the following months, each visit a little less formal than the last. Where the first meeting had felt like a solemn ceremony, later ones felt closer to a quiet exchange between two people who respected each other, even across the wide gap between our species. Korath brought healers of his own kind eventually, patient and careful, who worked alongside Laura to help the hatchlings heal fully. Talon's wings straightened bit by bit under their combined care, until one afternoon, nearly 4 months after I first found them, I watched her stretch that same wing wide and lift off the ground for the very first time, wobbling awkwardly through the air, before crashing gently into a padded wall, clearly thrilled with herself despite the clumsy landing. Ember stayed close to me through all of it, following wherever I walked whenever she was allowed to roam the station's safer sections. She grew quickly, her scales hardening bit by bit, though she remained, even as she grew, the smallest and most stubborn of the group. Word of what had happened spread quietly through both our people, not as some grand headline, but as a story told in smaller conversations, passed between crews at docking stations, between officers over quiet meals, between families back home who had grown tired of hearing only about distance and distrust between humans and Vossiskar. Not everyone approved. Some officers on our side still viewed the whole event as a dangerous risk that happened to work out, rather than a wise decision, and a few Voskar elders reportedly grumbled that trusting an outsider with something so precious as their young had been reckless on Korath's part. But slowly, quietly, something shifted between our two peoples that had not shifted in the 4 long years since we first made contact. Small trade agreements followed, a handful of careful, guarded meetings between representatives who had previously refused even to sit in the same room. None of it happened quickly, and none of it happened because of me alone. But Nora liked to say, half joking, that it all traced back to one stubborn officer who could not resist opening an airlock he had been told to leave shut. I did not think of myself as anything special. I simply could not listen to that sound coming from the wreck and do nothing about it. Anyone else might have done the same thing in my place, though I noticed, quietly, that nobody else had. 6 months after that first cold morning in the Kessa debris field, Laura called me down to the medical section with an odd note of excitement in her voice. "You need to see this," she said simply. I found her standing beside the enclosure where the 5 hatchlings now spent most of their days, watching them with a proud, careful expression. Talon stood taller than I remembered, wings fully healed, moving with a new kind of confidence. The others clustered nearby, stronger, brighter-eyed, clearly thriving under the steady care they had received. "They understand you now," Laura said, "not just your tone, actual words. We have been testing it quietly for weeks." I looked at Ember, who tilted her head at the sound of her name, ears, or whatever the small ridges near her skull were called, flicking slightly in recognition. "Ember," I said softly. She moved toward me immediately, pressing her head against my hand exactly the way she used to when she was small enough to fit entirely against my chest. "They are not fully grown yet," Laura added. "Talon especially still has years of growth ahead. But Korath has requested something. He wants to know if you would consider staying involved in their care as they continue growing, even after they eventually return to Vossiskar territory." I did not need to think long about my answer. A year later, I stood on a Voskar transport ship, watching through a wide viewport, as 5 young Voskar prepared for their first proper visit to their homeworld, a place none of them had ever seen since the day their original ship had been torn apart in the Kessa field. Talon stood tallest among them now, nearly matching my own height, her wings strong and steady. Ember pressed close beside me until the very last moment before boarding, refusing to let go of my sleeve until Korath gently nudged her forward himself. "They will thrive," Korath said, standing beside me as the transport doors began closing, "because someone chose to give them a chance to. They earned it themselves," I said. "I only opened a door." Korath's low rumble carried something close to amusement. "Among my people, we have a saying, a door opened at the right moment matters more than 1,000 doors opened too late." I never expected on that ordinary patrol to end up standing on the deck of a Voskar ship, watching 5 creatures I had once held against my chest step forward into a future none of us could have predicted. I never expected a single choice, made in defiance of a direct order, to quietly reshape the fragile relationship between 2 entire peoples. But sometimes the smallest decisions carry the heaviest weight. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to listen to a sound nobody else wants to hear, and to open their arms instead of walking away. I still visit them whenever duty allows. Talon leads her own small patrol group now, trusted enough by her people to guard young hatchlings of her own someday. Ember, still stubborn, still curious, insists on greeting me personally every single time my ship docks, refusing to let anyone else take that honor from her. And somewhere, logged quietly in an old station file, sits a standing order I once ignored, the single most important choice I ever made, sitting untouched, unenforced, and completely worth every risk it carried.